Welcome back, adventurers. I was in San Francisco recently, and I was blown away by the culture and vibrancy of a city that was shaped by waves of history. And it got me thinking about how cities grow, how they change, and how they take on unique identities, and how all of that applies to world building. You see, a great fantasy city isn't just a collection of streets and buildings. It is a living, breathing place that has a past, a present, and a future, and it's all shaped by the people that live within it, by the struggles that they are having, and transformations over time. San Francisco is a perfect example of this. Let's break down its history and see what we can learn about creating realistic and dynamic cities within our own worlds. Now, one thing to remember as a sort of rule of thumb is that a city isn't just one thing. It's a patchwork of districts, of social classes, various cultures, all with their own rules, their own traditions, and conflicts. And it's what makes cities such incredible melting pots. Your fantasy city should feel the same way. It should have layers of history. There should be old ruins beneath modern buildings, shifting power dynamics, and communities that are fighting to survive or hold on to their identity. San Francisco's history shows us how cities evolve over time, but to demonstrate that, let's start at the beginning. First, we are talking about the land before the city. I'm talking about pre-colonization and indigenous history. So this is world building lesson number 1 for you. Cities don't start from nothing. Ask yourself who was there before. Before Spanish colonization, San Francisco was home to the Ohlone people. They lived along the bay for thousands of years, building villages, trading with neighboring tribes, and thriving off of the region's natural resources. The Ohlone's seasonal migration patterns depended on the land and its climate. And the Ohlone had an established trade network with other indigenous groups in California. But when the Spanish arrived, the Ohlone people were forced into the mission system. Their way of life for thousands of years was nearly erased. So for your fantasy cities or your kingdoms or locations or whatever it is, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, were there ancient civilizations that existed before the current rulers? Are there old temples or ruins or sacred sites that still hold meaning to this day? And are there descendants of the original people still trying to reclaim their place? Now, with that little bit of background about the Ohlone people, we step into the next phase of San Francisco's history, which is the Spanish and Mexican era. And that was roughly around 1776 to 1848. And that leads us to world building lesson number 2, which is cities often start as something small and then explode in size. San Francisco started as Mission San Francisco de Asís, or Mission Dolores, founded by Spanish settlers in 1776, just a few days before the United States finished signing the newly formed Declaration of Independence. Now, technically, the mission was part of New Spain and later Mexico after they gained their independence in 1821. During this period, the Spanish built missions, and they also built forts called presidios and pueblos along the California coast with the goal of Christianizing and controlling indigenous populations. The Spanish mission system was designed to bring native Californians under Spanish rule, forcing them into labor, converting them to Catholicism, and disrupting their traditional way of life. Now, during this period in San Francisco's history, the Franciscan missionaries used missions as religious, economic, and military centers. Indigenous people were forcibly converted and made to work in agriculture, livestock, and construction. The Presidio of San Francisco was established as a military fort to protect the region from foreign powers and indigenous resistance. So all of that sounds really bleak and really dark, and all I'm trying to give you is a little bit of background into what was the foundation of San Francisco before it became a city. So when you're building your world, when you're building your cities, your kingdoms, or what have you, think about whether or not this city was built as a religious or military outpost before it grew into something larger. Is there tension between old religious institutions and new ruling powers, or just people trying to live in a world without that religion? And what ruins, relics, or forgotten histories still linger from this early era in your world? And this period in San Francisco's history laid the foundation for its expansion later on, setting the stage for the gold rush explosion that would come just a few decades later. Which takes us into the gold rush boom, which is roughly between 1848 into the 1860s, and that is also going to take us into world building lesson number 3 when thinking about San Francisco as your sort of starting point, and that is that economic booms bring chaos. They also bring diversity and conflict. You see, in 1848, gold was discovered in California just outside of modern-day Sutter's Fort in Sacramento, California. By 1849, San Francisco's population exploded from a little over 1,000 to over 25,000 in less than a year as fortune seekers from around the world flooded in. This sudden growth overwhelmed the fledgling city, which led to lawlessness, it led to crime, and a lot of makeshift housing. This also led to the creation of rapidly forming districts, each with its own character. This boom also made some people insanely rich, while others fell into extreme poverty, having left everything behind just to come to California. Some of the most famous districts formed during this time. You have the Barbary Coast, known for gambling, brothels, and crime. You have Chinatown, which was established by Chinese immigrants who faced intense racism and legal exclusion. And then you also have North Beach, which was home to Italian immigrants that was famous for its cafes and its bakeries. And what's fascinating is that many, if not all of these districts, especially for immigrants, had to learn and create their own systems of protection because the local governments wouldn't do it for them. And this in turn leads to some really amazing stories and settings for stories, both fictional and not. So, for your world building, ask yourself, is there a magical resource or a treasure or a boom that has changed a city or a location overnight? Who is benefiting from this and who is left struggling? And are there new districts emerging rapidly in these cities, creating social divisions or areas with distinct cultures, rules, and leaders? San Francisco became a massive town very quickly because of one sudden change that put it on the map. Then that leads us into the next phase, which is the racial tensions and immigration of the 1860s into the 1900s. And that leads us to world building lesson number 4, which is that growing cities lead to tension, conflict, and ultimately resilience. Now we know how it is that San Francisco became one of the most culturally diverse cities in America, but with that came tensions and exclusionary policies. You see, Chinese immigrants arrived in massive numbers to work in gold mines, to work on railroads and factories, but they faced brutal racism and exclusion. They were forced into Chinatown due to violence and discriminatory housing laws. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 is just one of the major US laws that actually banned immigration based on race and prevented Chinese laborers from entering the country and barring those that were already here from becoming citizens. And Irish and Italian immigrants settled in North Beach and other working-class neighborhoods, taking jobs in dock work, construction, and city infrastructure. They faced prejudice from a lot of the wealthier Anglo-American communities, but over time, Irish and Italian groups gained political influence. And the Mexican and Latin American immigrants shaped the Mission District, establishing businesses, churches, and cultural institutions that still exist today. So when looking at your city, you can start to think about what different cultures there are and how they interact, how they clash, how they blend in the city. Are there laws that are restricting certain groups from gaining power? And you can see a lot of this in some master world building like The Witcher, where the elves are ostracized and actually left outside of the day-to-day life. Are there community leaders or rebels that are fighting to protect their neighborhoods? And that leads us now to the 1906 earthquake and the rebuilding into the 1920s, and world building lesson number 5, which is that disasters reshape a city. They happen, and who rebuilds and who gets left behind are very, very important things to consider. You see, everything changed on April 18, 1906, when an earthquake and a fire destroyed 80% of San Francisco. The earthquake itself caused absolute devastation, and the fires raged for more than 3 days, destroying much of what remained. Wealthier districts were prioritized for rebuilding, while poorer areas were left in ruins for much, much longer. And if you've ever been to San Francisco, you know that the views from the tops of the hills are some of the most breathtaking, so naturally, the wealthy built along the beaches and along the tops of the hills, Nob Hill to name one. So what we can see is that some neighborhoods were rebuilt stronger than before, while others were lost and completely changed. And all of that is a major oversimplification of the decades of history that really went on after the earthquake and how the districts and neighborhoods were restructured and how entire communities were replaced. But what we can take away from this is that the catastrophes, like the earthquake or the fires, can completely reshape a city. So when considering your own cities, when you're doing your world building, think about whether there's been a war or a magical disaster or just a natural catastrophe that may have reshaped the city. Did the elite use that disaster to push out marginalized communities? And are there ruined districts or ghost towns that were left behind? And that leads us to world building lesson number 6. The most recent history is what will impact your city building the most. The next few decades in San Francisco would see the city absolutely transformed by the rise of industry, war, urban renewal, and civil rights movements. The Great Depression hit working-class neighborhoods hard, and many immigrant communities struggled to stay afloat. And soon after that came World War II, which changed the city once again. This time, the war effort created thousands of jobs, especially in shipbuilding and manufacturing. Women and people of color entered the workforce in larger numbers, leading to huge social shifts. Japanese Americans in the Fillmore district were forcibly removed and sent to internment camps in 1942, leaving behind homes and businesses that were taken over by others. And the black population in San Francisco grew dramatically as workers from the South arrived to fill wartime jobs, reshaping neighborhoods like the Fillmore district. And by the end of World War II, San Francisco was a booming economic powerhouse, but this boom came with deep racial and class divides that would lead to major conflicts in the coming decades. And by the 1950s, the city government began a wave of urban renewal projects just a nice cover for mass displacement of marginalized communities. In post-World War II San Francisco, the Fillmore District became known as the Harlem of the West, and it was a thriving hub of black culture, jazz clubs, and businesses. And then starting in the 80s and accelerating into the 90s and early 2000s, San Francisco became the center of the tech industry, bringing massive economic growth and new jobs that attracted young professionals. This, of course, skyrocketed housing prices, forced working class families out, and the rise of Silicon Valley influence shifted the political power towards corporations. And now, for better or worse, this is the truth and the state of the city today. Even almost 3 decades into the 21st century, we still feel the history. So for your fantasy city, think about whether there's a new industry or a magical innovation that is transforming the city. Are there old neighborhoods that are being destroyed in favor of new developments, hopefully not malls? How is your history remembered? Who is in power today, and what does that mean for older generations? And here we are now in modern day San Francisco, and that leads me to my final world building lesson, lesson number 7, cities are stories on their own. San Francisco today is a city deeply shaped by its past, where the legacies of colonization, immigration, economic booms, disasters, and activism still influence everyday life. Even as it continues to evolve today, the city carries the scars of its history, and there are many issues that exist in the city to this day that are just remnants of all that history. San Francisco has become one of the most expensive cities in the world, and its history of economic and social struggles continues in new forms. Obviously, there's gentrification that has pushed out longtime residents. The city has also become a center of both extreme wealth and extreme poverty, with tech billionaires living in high-rise luxury, while a severe housing crisis has left thousands of people homeless. And despite these challenges, San Francisco remains a cultural and technological hub, home to activism, home to innovation, and resilience. Some neighborhoods have fought to preserve their cultural identity, while others have been completely transformed by new industries and populations. The layers of history are still absolutely visible, and you can walk through Chinatown and see a district that has fought for its survival, or visit the Mission District and see the murals that tell the story of a generation of struggle and resistance. Because San Francisco today is a battleground between its past and its future, between wealth and poverty, and between culture and commercialization. So what can we learn from San Francisco, at least in terms of world building? Well, San Francisco teaches us that a city isn't just roads and buildings. A city is the people who live there, the battles that they've fought, the history that they've been through, and the changes that continue to shape it. So for our last lesson when designing your fantasy city, don't just create a static world. Think about how you can layer its history, what it was, what it is, and what it's becoming. Think about power shifts, who controls it today versus who controlled it in the past. Consider conflict, which communities are thriving and which ones are fighting for survival. And then make it feel alive, make it more than a backdrop, make it a breathing, evolving place that is full of stories, and not just one type of story, but thousands of stories that represent all of the people that live in it. And you can see the same example of city building throughout history and city after city, even the town or city that you live in. In fact, I challenge you to discover one cool fact about your hometown and drop it in the comments down below. I hope this video was as fun for you as it was for me. I put a lot of time and effort into this one. If you liked this video and you want to see more like it, leave a comment down below. And if you want to support the channel and you have the financial means, you can check out our Patreon. You can come hang out in the Discord, or also just subscribing, because so many of you are not subscribed. You know who you are. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Forge on, my friends, and we'll see you next time, adventurers.